Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications. Now, if I told you that it was July the 3rd, would you believe me? Well, you better, because it is July the 3rd, unless you're listening to this video on a different day. Then you have a point. Now, I just want to say, I hope you're having a good day today, and I hope it's just a little bit, just a wee bit better than it was yesterday. And that way, if these trends continue, in just a few years, you'll be doing much better than you are today, right? I mean, hey, that's the way I look at it. So, I do have a couple questions to cover in this video. Actually, to be honest, it's actually a question and a comment. And if you have a question that you would like to ask, you're always welcome to do it by just posting your question in the comment, and I'll do my best to answer it in the next video, and you can just listen to my so-called answer in the next video. Or you can email me directly at searchforsigns@mail.com and get the same result. All right. I do want to point out the background photo that I'm using in this video. It was taken in June. It was taken on June the 5th, 1989, during the Tiananmen Square protest in China. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm very familiar with this photo because since this photo came out, this is hands down the most inspiring photo I've ever seen in my life. Now, if you don't know the history of this photo, of course, it ended up being a very, one of the most memorable photos of the previous century and so forth. And I think it was a Pulitzer Prize winning photograph for sure. It was a video actually, but this is the photograph of the video. But here's these tanks rolling down the street to go bust up the protests. And if you watch this video, whoever this man is, some people think it's this man, I can't remember the name, but it's really not been confirmed so really he's just an unknown person. And he sees these tanks rolling in the direction of Tiananmen Square, and bag in one hand or briefcase in one hand and a coat in the other, he goes running out in the middle of the street and stands right in front of these tanks with such fearlessness and resistance to what he saw as a major evil going into into these protests. These tanks tried to divert, he got in their way, and then he ended up jumping on the tank and saying something to the tank commander, and then he jumped back down and stood in front of the tanks. So very, 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 to me, I said, it's a very inspirational photo, but so true of what we all should do when we see things that we see as an injustice. And now, in all fairness, China, if we knew more about China's race structure, we would know that it has a first-rate soul of will or power, and people who have the first ray in them, and whether it's in the personality or their soul, if they're able to manifest that soul energy on any level, they exhibit absolute fearlessness. They don't desire fearlessness. They don't talk about it with their family and their friends about how fearless they are. They just are. And they also have influence over the time that which they live and far beyond when they live. And they do it naturally. They don't desire it. And so many of us desire influence. We desire to be influential over people. We desire fearlessness, but it's not coming from that. So those of us who just are naturally fearless, who can stand in front of 10 tanks rolling toward Tiananmen Square, probably got some first ray in them, for sure. And like I said, it's inspirational. Now, the other thing I wanted to kind of point out about China always gets a bad rap here in the United States because we don't see eye to eye with the Chinese, really. Now, we do business with them, and China's always been kind of, well, if we need you, we're here for you, and if we don't need you, we're not, right? That's coming from their third-rate personality of active intelligence. And if you've ever had a cat in your life, they act just like cats. Cats themselves are actually on the third ray, and that's why they act like that. And when they want to be pet, you can pet them. And when they don't want to be pet, if you have certain cats, they won't let you pet them. So, that's kind of the way the Chinese are. Now, the other thing too is that Benjamin Creme's master said that 30% of the population in China have the first ray as their soul. And he said that you can't imagine the in the future when they are all starting to demonstrate the that will nature of that soul, how powerful that country is going to be, and influential and totally fearless, right? But serving the plan along with all the other nations under the guidance of these masters. But it has a role to play, even though the United States doesn't really get along with China. We get along with them, like I said, business-wise, but in terms of ideology, we don't get along with them really at all. But like I said, in the future, they'll play a very prominent role in the League of Nations. Now, also, I wanted to kind of point out that the hierarchy of masters they experiment a lot. They're like higher scientists in a way, and one of the ways that their experimentations are working out is through nations. There were three in particular that have been going on for quite some time, and then now we've had to add a fourth one of China. So the first one is Russia, for instance, and this isn't any degree of importance. I'm just going to list them off like this. The experiment going on in Russia under the inspiration of these masters, and the plan for Russia is to be a bunch of confederated states under the umbrella of one nation, operating as a nation but a confederacy at the same time. That's the plan for Russia, to see how that works out. And then the second one would be, let's say, the United States, where all these races coming from all over the world will come together and will start to interbreed and mix, and out of that mixing of the races will come a new race of people several 100,000 years from now, apparently. But it's going to come from the United States. That's the plan with the United States. So that's why I find it rather ironic and auspicious that we've had such racial issues in this country for as long as we have, because it's in the end it's going to be a total harmony and create a whole new race of people. So, and then the third one would be Britain. And if you know anything about Britain, of course, they conquered the world, and they had all these different nations like India, Canada, Australia, Hong Kong, and those kind of things. And these people could travel back to England and live if they want. But it's people of different races and different nationalities living together side by side. And that's the purpose of the great experiment going on in England. Not so much the mixing of the races, although I'm sure that happens because you see a cute Asian girl or somebody else that might be really cute, and you want to marry them, and that's okay. It's not like they're going to outlaw that or anything. It's just that's not the plan of that country. So, but in the future, that's the role that England's going to play. And then lastly is now China. Out of China, it is a totalitarianistic tyranny, to kind of government, but there is a element of democracy. So the experiment going on in Russia now is, and will be going on into the future, is a totalitarianistic government, like a democratic totalitarianistic government. It almost seems like an oxymoron of things, but that's what's going on there. So hopefully that gives you a little more insight into something. All right, so the first question comes from Peter Miller. Can Maitreya read minds like Jesus and Buddha? Yes, and you have to add my mother in there because she used to read my mind all the time when I would do something I wasn't supposed to do. She knew. She always knew. She could always tell when I was lying too. Yes, all these masters can read our minds like a children's book, like a kindergarten book, So, and I'll give you an example. Okay, so there was a time that I met Maitreya on a break. It was about an hour, so I sat with him for nearly an hour on a music he did I was doing. And he came over, we were talking about some different things, and I don't have to rehash the whole experience. If you go to my playlist of my Maitreya experiences, you can go down and you can, I think it's the title, The Time Maitreya Sat Down and Talked with Me, and you can hear a little bit more about the experience. But to kind of give it to kind of cut to the chase on it, is, based on your question, is I was starting to suspect that he was Maitreya based on some of the things that he was saying, and I wanted to test him. And I never asked if he was Maitreya because I didn't have the desire to ask him that, but I wanted to just test him on it. And the way I was going to test him, seems kind of childish now the more I talk about it, but it made sense back then, was I wanted to say something that Benjamin Creme said in one of his books or lectures or the times that I saw him, and see if he actually responded to it in a positive way. And I was like, maybe that is Maitreya, right? Because he was saying some things that were quite profound that I was like, okay, this guy's something extraordinary. But just like Maitreya doesn't claim to be Maitreya or the Christ or anything, all the times I've seen him, he's never claimed to be Maitreya. So just, we'll put that out of our minds. But anyway, just claims to be an ordinary person, just like he is on TV. But I went to go test him. Now, the funny thing is the only thing I could think of was this corny joke. I mean, it is corny. It's like a Gary joke. It's so corny, but it served a purpose when Benjamin Creme said it, because he was talking about living in the now, and when you live in the now, you forget about the past. As Krishnamurti said, memory is thine enemy. So as you start to focus on the now, all the regrets you might have, or those kind of things, feeling guilty about something, or even just your memory about things, you have a tendency to forget it. So you almost become forgetful, in a way. So he said this joke to kind of prove a point in a humorous way. A guy goes to a doctor complaining of memory problems. The doctor says to him, well, how long have you been having these problems? And the guy says, what problems? So that was the joke that Benjamin Creme said. Kind of a stupid joke, right? I hear crickets now, so nobody's laughing. Except for, well, that was my laugh. But anyway. So I went to go test Maitreya, and the only thing I could think of was this darn joke. So what I said to him was, I got something I want to say to you. And he goes, no. I have a joke much better than what you were going to tell me. And I never told him I was going to tell him a joke. He already knew it. And then he says the exact same joke in the exact same way. He goes, a man goes to a doctor complaining of memory problems. The doctor says, well, how long have you been having these problems? And then the guy says, what problems? So he said the joke right to me. And then the other example was, we were walking out of the hotel in the same time that Maitreya was talking to me. He turns to me and he goes, I like to find treasure among the trash. He goes, it's been a hope of mine for years that I would be able to find some long lost painting or artifact or something like this in somebody's garage, or a garage sale or a thrift store or something like this, and make millions off of it, right? And that was a desire I'd always had, was to, if you'd asked Gary 30 years ago, how are you going to make, if you were going to make millions of dollars, that was going to be it. I was going to find hidden treasure somewhere in something, maybe in artwork or something like that, right? So as we're walking out, he says this to me, and then I think to myself, Peter, I say, I would love I'm sorry, I skipped a step. He goes, Gary, I would love to send you something. So if you give me your address, I'll send you something. That's what he said. And then I thought to myself, I didn't say anything out loud. I thought to myself, I would love a Picasso painting. And he goes, Gary, I don't think I can get you a Picasso painting, but I'll find you something. So yes, these masters can see your thoughts. They can read your thoughts like a book, your emotional state, everything like this. And then even take it a step further. When they look at a person, they can see all their past lifetimes, what they did in their last lifetimes, and they can see future lifetimes. They can see how you're going to be as a master, what you'll be doing as a master, and so forth, all happening now. And one example of that was there was a person who Benjamin Creme was talking about. He was talking about this in reference to karma and how karma works out. Karma, people think, is a punishment on somebody else, when it's really just a balancing out. When we create karma for ourselves, whether it's good or bad, all of us have more good karma than bad karma, or pleasant karma than unpleasant karma, really. It creates an imbalance. Well, that balance needs to be worked out. So there was a woman who knew Benjamin Creme through this work. I guess she was a part of the transmission group somewhere. And when she was young, her father molested her. And she had been working through that emotional turmoil her whole life, and was starting to kind of, really get to the end of, through service and through, her detachment and forgiveness, she was starting to work through it, and was almost very close to working through it forever. But anyway, when Benjamin Creme, I don't know if the woman told him this, or if it was by sight, his master told him telepathically what was going on with this woman. 2 lifetimes ago, it started with her father, the same father who was in this lifetime, in the previous lifetime, molesting her, the daughter. They had that dynamic, that dysfunctional relationship in that lifetime. And then in the next lifetime, they flipped roles. The woman who was the woman now was the father then. And she took on the role as the molester of the father who was the daughter in that lifetime. And so in her previous lifetime, she was the father molesting the daughter. And then it resurfaced again in this lifetime where the father came back as the father, and then she was born as the daughter, and then they had that same situation come up. And he's in this and Benjamin Creme's master said he told Ben, and I don't know if Ben ever told the woman, but it was looking like this was going to be the last time it ever happened, because she was, through service and through the work that she was doing with herself, it was looking like that was going to be it. So that's the good news of it. And then Benjamin Creme went on to say, he goes, the majority of the time, hands down, the majority of the time when somebody is killed in this lifetime, or molested in this lifetime, or raped in this lifetime, they were the perpetrator in the last life. So, or the murderer, or the rapist, or the molester in the last life. And it will keep working itself out until it balances out. So it leads me to the article that I want to read. It's called Justice is Divine. I have two purposes for reading this article. One is just what we were talking about, justice, because so many of us, especially in the United States, look at justice as a way of retribution, right? So when I read that article, that's not what the masters are talking about when it comes to justice. And the other reason is because it's the day before the 4th of July, and, in this country, it's all about freedom and not so much about justice. And in the future, we'll realize that justice and freedom are one and the same. You can't have true justice without true freedom. So when I get to go reading it, that's why I'm talking about this woman, what was going on with this woman, and how that relates to the article that I'm going to read. But real quick, I do want to read a comment that Zen wrote, and I think it's worth of all of us to kind of listen to, and hopefully we'll take it to heart. And I'm just going to comment a little bit about it, Zen. There's not much I can really add to it because I think you said it all in this. But it says, when you said, quote, he wouldn't necessarily always tell you what you wanted to hear, unquote, and she's referring to the last video where I said that Benjamin Creme was honest, and just because he was honest doesn't mean you would want to hear what he had to say. And a lot of times he would say, you sure you want to know? And he would, then he would say, so sometimes he would give you a little bit of a warning. It reminded me of a concept I have come across in many different religious and spiritual teachings and traditions, whereby it is posited that, quote, you cannot truly know something if you already believe you know it, or you cannot come to know God if you believe you already know him, or once you believe something, you are no longer seeking it. Our minds can be tricky like that, right? And it seems like an inherent mechanism to believe. But it can really limit our ability to know, because once we believe something, it is hard for us to hear something contrary to it and take it on board. As a natural defense mechanism of the mind, we tend to turn our backs on things that challenge our beliefs, which often keeps us further away from the path of knowing. So thank you, Zen, for sharing that. What I was going to add to that, Zen, which, hopefully I don't take away from what you said, because I think you said a lot in that, but at the beginning of every one of Benjamin Creme's lectures, he would always ask people, how many people have heard this information before and how many people are hearing it for the first time. And then he would make a request. He would always say, if you can, try to listen to this information with an open mind, and then consider it, and whatever you do with it is your right. You don't have to do anything if you don't want to do anything with this information. You don't even have to believe in it or whatever, but he just requested that people listen with an open mind. Then he always said, all of us imagine ourselves to be open-minded, but he said that he found that a truly open mind is the rarest thing in the world. And I remember hearing that, and I was like, no, I got an open mind. And then when I started really being honest with myself, I'm just as closed-minded as a lot of people, Now, there's various degrees of that, obviously. I mean, it's not just one or, it's not all or nothing, but, and nothing in between, where there's various gradations of that. But you were so right when you said what you said, Zen. So thank you so much for putting it in there. I hope everybody hears it. All right, so I want to read Benjamin Crime's master's article, Justice is Divine. And like I was saying earlier, it's, for a couple of different reasons. And if you're in the United States, you might have heard of this nonprofit group called the Wounded Warrior Project. And their slogan is freedom isn't free. And they're saying that slogan because of people who have died in wars fighting for, quote unquote, our freedom and so forth. And I'm not belittling soldiers. I'm just saying it's the ideal that these soldiers have and people have of soldiers in this country, that we're always fighting for freedom, when a lot of times we're probably not. But anyway, they might be fighting for freedom, but the country itself isn't fighting for freedom, I guess is my point. But when I started looking at that quote, I was like, if you look at it from a different way, that's my biggest beef with capitalism, is freedom isn't free. If you have money, you can be as free as you want, you can travel all over the world. You can, live in really nice homes. If you ever have a medical issue, you can go right to the doctor, no problem, take care of it. Everything's fine. You're good to go. You are golden if you have the money. Now, if you don't, you're stuck and you can't go anywhere. Or if you can go somewhere, you don't go very far for very long. You know what I mean? Or if you have a problem, medically, you can't go to the doctor because you don't have insurance, or insurance is too expensive, or whatever like that, right? So you see what I'm saying? Now, the masters would tell you that justice and freedom are one and the same. You can't have true justice without freedom, and you can't have true freedom without justice. And then in the United States, it's all about freedom at the expense of justice. In other so-called communist countries, which I don't think they're truly communist, like China, it's more state-sponsored capitalism, but they have justice and equality at the expense of freedom, and you can't have both. You have to have both. You can't have one or the other. So, and then the other reason why I'm reading this too is because I did an interview on somebody else's YouTube channel, and that he brought up the fact that I kept bringing up justice, and he said, well, justice isn't divine. That's more like legal retribution, or legalized retribution, or something like this. And the master talks about this in this. So when I bring up the fact that Maitreya says the path to peace is, without sharing there could be no justice, without justice there could be no peace, without peace there could be no future. That peace, the double entendre of justice, is not legalized justice. It's this justice. So when we read this, I want to kind of point this out. So hopefully this helps. And it might be a few days before I put up another video. But again, if you have a question or two you want to ask, please feel free to ask it, and I'll do my best to answer it. And if you live in the United States, I hope you have a wonderful, very subdued July 4th. I don't think that's going to be as big a 4th of July celebrations as they are in the past, obviously, for obvious reasons. All right, here we go. Justice is divine. Longed for by millions, bereft of its sacred balance, justice brings to the world of men the harmony of God. As a looking glass reflects the image of man, so does justice reflect the nature of the divine. The measure of the lawlessness of the time is known by the degree of injustice in the world, and today injustice stalks the poor on every hand. Legally, justice rules the field of social regulation, of crime and punishment, but fundamentally, justice has to do with the laws of God, which work towards harmony and correct relationship. Every injustice, however small, brings disharmony to the whole. Today, so great are the areas of injustice in every land that extraordinary measures are required to prevent total chaos. Injustice is a denial of man's divine potential. It separates man from man and humanity from God. Throughout the world, many are struggling to free themselves from age-long injustice, exploration, and tyranny, to set down at last the yoke carried by their forebears. We, the watching hierarchy, commend their struggle, for we see it as the expression of the divine spark in all men, yearning for freedom and justice. We give them our hand as we gaze with compassion on their plight. There are those who would deny that all men have equal rights to a share of God's providence. Those who argue thus have listened only to the voice of the separated self, forgetting that naught that they have and hold but comes to them from God. When men take heed of the voice of God within them, they find in sharing injustice the only answer to man's ills. Today, more and more, the voice of the inner God is being heard. On all sides are arising spokesmen for the dispossessed. The clamor for justice is growing and soon will swell into a crescendo of sound, drowning out the cries for caution which issue from the representatives of the past. How can there be two worlds when the world is one? How can there be division when the law is the same for all men? Presently, men will understand that the suffering of the many is the illnesses of the whole, and that justice alone will provide the cure. Aid provides but half the answer. Though aid is essential now, justice must blossom fully in the garden of men's hearts and so set all men free. Justice creates the conditions in which man can know himself as God. Linked to his brother by love, he can take boldly in his hands his future and fashion it according to the blueprint of God. Many desire that future now, blessed are as they are with the vision of the whole, yet not but work and effort will bring it into being, through the manifestation of justice, love, and joy. Remember as you move towards the future that no one takes these steps alone. As brothers, all must men proceed along the pathway that leads directly to the source. From that very source does justice emanate, relating men in harmony and love. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.